So in the same way that you can use automation, in MIDI you can use effects. Now remember that when you load a virtual instrument, you load it as an effect, but that's a different thing than loading an effect. So you can have a MIDI instrument, and then in addition to that, you can have an effect. So if you look through, if you click on effects, you see that I have an instrument loaded here, but I can add any kind of effect I want. Let's try using a delay. So we'll click on that. And notice that when you start adding things, they will sort of be added to this list over here. And what that means is that the instrument will be fed through the delay and then whatever other effects, so it becomes a chain. So you have to be mindful of that, because if the effects are in the wrong order, you may not get the result that you want. You might have the piano after, and so then you don't get this isn't working. But if you leave it the way it is, it'll typically be fine. And you don't necessarily want to stack too many effects in here anyway, because as we've seen in the other videos that talk about effects, it's always good to keep the effects organized outside, unless it's, I mean, you could do it this way too, but especially if you start to have multiple tracks, it is better to have the effects separate so you can keep track of them independently, not having to go here and say, oh, what effect did I use in that particular track? So we'll have a, let's see, we'll do 6/8 note delay, and we'll do a little bit of feedback. I'm sorry, I'm just recovering from a really bad cold, so I keep coughing. We'll have a little bit of feedback, and let's see what happens. Right, I don't know if it's that clear, but there is, maybe if I get rid of this volume change, because it's starting kind of soft. You hear the delay continuing. Let me clear this envelope over here. Let's add a different effect. Then maybe it keeps going on. So you know it's there. Let's remove it. Let's add now, let's see, maybe a reattune. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is a tuner. Reapitch is what I was looking for. Reapitch. Somewhere in here. There it is. Okay, so we'll go here and we'll say, we'll go up an octave. And so now we'll hear both octaves going at the same time. Ah, no, actually, this is cool. We're only hearing the transposed version. Huh, that's right. Okay, so if we go an octave lower, we only hear that. So this would be a good way if you had, let's say, a flute sound and you sort of wish to have it really low, then because you can't, as we've seen, you can't create a MIDI note that is too low than the range of the MIDI instrument, you can just write it an octave higher and then pitch shift it and transpose it lower. So then the sound, the resulting sound, is being transposed by the shifter over here, which could be could lead to some interesting things. So maybe we'll try that. We'll put some flute over here instead. And we would have to go here and change that instrument to a flute. As soon as I click on the right place, and we'll go to flute solo. I think I'm probably beyond the range already. Go here and take a look. Yeah, it's way too. So I'm going to have to select and go up quite a bit. Let's go all the way up to C4. It's very tiny. You can barely see. There we go. Now we can hear. So now this is the flute part. Right, and then we can go to the effect and we can go down, let's say, 5 octaves. Right, so we get a really low flute sound. So that will be one little trick that you can use. Okay. And naturally, we can use sends and receives in the same exact way. So I might go and do, I mean, we don't need to talk about this all over again, but I could have the effect out here, and I could have my reverb over here, and I could load my impulse just like you've seen. And so I'm just going to pick a random one. And so now there's no effect going through, because as you've learned in the last module, you have to route signals into here. So there's my reverb. And then I can now go here and I can say send to the reverb. And then I can go ahead and uncheck this where it says master parent send, and then I'll create a clean track and I'll send it to that as well. So this would be a good way, for example, to have a pitch shifted version of your original and then a non-pitch shifted version, and then you could blend them together. So now we have a delay. I'm sorry, a reverb. And so of course you can't hear anything here, and the reason is that we're using a flute and the flute doesn't go that low. So we would have to get rid of this. And then we could just loop it and continue to loop over here, and then who knows, we could do all kinds of stuff. We could add a tempo change, time signature change. Well, we won't change the time signature, we'll just change the tempo to 200 and see. Yeah, so this is, for example, you can hear that it's not a real flute, but there's some things you can do with MIDI that you can't do. Well, a lot of things that you can do with MIDI that you can't do with real instruments. So I think it's a lot of fun to explore super high speeds, for example, or having something repeat over and over and over and over. Of course, a flute player would have to take a break, and with MIDI you can just go completely crazy. You don't have to make it sound realistic. You can just do whatever. So that's kind of what you're going to be doing in the next project. You're going to be exploring, putting it all together. You're going to be using effects and doing automation, and maybe even combining MIDI with audio. Although I think we're going to stick to MIDI just to kind of not complicate things too much, and just maybe do a more elaborate MIDI piece. But you're certainly welcome to combine some audio, maybe some singing if you want to sing something. And once again, it's just an opportunity for you to toy around with some of the things you've learned. And but I will be talking about the project in a separate video, and see you in the next one.